Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about investor visa options. We're going to go through a number of different investor visa options, including the E2 visa. And the E2 visa is one that is near and dear to us because our firm was actually founded on an E2 visa 10 years ago. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Sorry, someone's just mentioning they can't hear me as well. So let me just perhaps try to turn up the volume a little bit. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First and foremost, if you do have any questions, you can put those questions in the chat box, or you can use the question and answer function. And with that, this particular webinar will be recorded, and we will send you a number of things after the presentation. We will first send you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that we plan to go through. We will also send you a copy of the actual recording. We will also send you a number of guides. So there are a number of different visas that we're going to go through today, and we are going to send you comprehensive guides that really describe a lot of the things that I will go through during the presentation, but you'll have these as reference points to refer to. We're also going to send you information on where you can set up a consultation if you do want to speak with us further about your particular legal situation. And finally, we do have a YouTube channel, and when we record this video and other videos, we post those to the YouTube channel. So we do encourage you to sign up to our YouTube channel and hit the notification button, and you will be notified every time that we post a video. And we do post a number of immigration videos, often posting videos, 3 or 4 videos even a week. So without further ado, let's get into the different types of visas. So here are the visas that we're going to talk about today: the E2, the National Interest Waiver, the International Entrepreneur Rule, and the EB-5 green card. So let's jump right into the first one, the E2 visa. As I mentioned, this is the visa that we are on, the firm. The firm is founded on an E2 visa, so I'm in the United States on an E2 visa. And I think that the biggest obstacle with this particular visa has to do often with the country, because it is a visa that is only available to nationals from certain countries, and around 80 countries on the list. And I'm Canadian, and Canada is one of the countries on the list, and it requires a passport. So it doesn't matter where you were born, it's the country that you have nationality in. So you can, as long as you have a passport from one of those countries, you can consider applying for an E2 visa. So this is an investor visa, and it does require you to invest money in the US. And the investment amount, the interesting thing about this particular visa is the investment amount is not a fixed amount. So there's no set amount that you have to invest in. Instead, what happens is you look at the particular type of business that you are starting, you assess how much it would cost to get that business up and running, and then you spend, normally, if that amount is under a few $100,000, you spend that amount, and then apply. So this visa can be obtained by starting a business. So, with this particular, my firm was a consulting firm, a law firm that we started and applied for the E2 visa. But you can also purchase a business. So there can be an existing business, a restaurant, gas station, convenience store, it doesn't matter. You can purchase a business, and that you can apply for an E2 visa that way as well. Also, franchises make excellent E2 visas. So certainly, that's another great option for E2 visa if it's available to you. So the funds have to be at risk. One of the biggest questions we get with respect to the E2 visa is, well, I have to spend the money and I don't even know if I'm going to get the visa. But unfortunately, that is the case. That you are required to actually spend the money. So it wouldn't work to say start a consulting business and then put $100,000 in a business bank account and then go to the consulate and apply for an E2 visa. They won't approve it. They will require that you spend a good amount of it, probably 40,000 or so of it before they would even consider it. And then even that low amount wouldn't work in many consulates. So definitely the key here is spending some money and really spending in a wide range of categories, because you want to be able to communicate to the consulate that you have spent everything that is required to get the business up and running. The next thing that you have to look at is, where the money came from. Now, if we're applying at a consulate, we don't spend a lot of time on source of funds, but you should provide the consulate with an explanation of where the money came from. And there are lots of, the money could come from gift, it could come from loan, it could come from the sale of a house, sale of stock. So lots of different ways, but you should provide an explanation and also some documentation to support that. We're going to talk about a little bit more about substantial in the next slide. I touched on some of the things already that we will go over in that slide. So in terms of the types of things that you'd spend money on inventory, equipment, website, really anything that's required to get the business up and running. If you're doing a home renovation business, then you may want to buy a truck, tools. You want to spend money on marketing, rent, really everything that's required to get the business up and running. If you're purchasing a business, one way, if you're worried that you might give the seller a few $100,000 and then you don't get the visa, you can arrange the transaction where you put the money in escrow, and the escrow agent is holding the money, and then the only condition that exists is the approval of the E2 visa. That is, if the E2 visa is approved, then the money goes to the seller. If the E2 visa is denied, it goes back to the buyer. So that's one, and that's only applicable if you are actually buying a business. The next requirement related to the E2 visa is really the crux of the E2 visa, because it's all about US jobs. So the reason that this visa exists is because the government wants to stimulate the economy, and the government is looking at your investment amount to ascertain whether or not you will be able to hire US workers. So that's really what it's all about, and it comes under this description in the legal statute that the business cannot be marginal, but it really gets at hiring employees. In terms of, you don't have to have employees on day one. However, your business should be able to, in the 5 years or 5-year period, be able to support probably 3 or 4 full-time, or the equivalent of 3 or 4 full-time employees. So that, that can be demonstrated with a business plan, or if you really want to bolster your application, you could actually have an employee or 2 even before you apply for the E2 visa. The business has to be real and operating. So this is not a visa where you're just thinking about setting up a business. Everything has to be set up before you apply. The bank account has to be set up. The lease has to be set up. The business can even be taking in money. The website has to be created. So we had one client who went to the consulate to apply for an E2 visa, and she was setting up an E2 visa for a gym. And the officer asked her, well, if I went to the gym right now, what would I see? And she said, the equipment's there, the employees are hired, the place is leased, all they're waiting for me to open the doors. And that's really what the officer was expecting to hear. So the business does have to be real and operating. And you have to be coming to the US to develop and direct the operation. So this particular visa is not good for people who are interested in a passive investment. And the other kind of requirement and this is a requirement that has to be in place the entire time that you have your E2 visa, is if you're getting the E2 visa under the investor category, you have to own at least 50% of the company. It doesn't have to be 51, but it just has to be at least 50. And then the intent to return home if your E2 visa expires, and that's a simple attestation that proves that. So in terms of how much to invest, it's probably the number one question that we get with respect to E2 visas. And there are a few things that you have to consider. So there's no minimum amount, but the government is not going to approve, even if a business is a service-oriented business. And one could argue that a consulting business only takes, $5,000 to get set up. But that is, if you only invested $5,000, you would never get an E2 visa, unfortunately, even though that's probably all you do need to set up that kind of business. So there's always a requirement to invest. We recommend often that investing at least $40,000, and even that is going to be a low amount for an E2 visa. But what you really have to look at is the type of business that you are thinking of setting up. If you are thinking of setting up a, like a car manufacturing plant or something like that, then you will have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the E2 visa, maybe even the millions of dollars to get the E2 visas. If you're buying a restaurant for $200,000, that could be sufficient. Even buying a restaurant for $100,000 could be sufficient as long as it's profitable and has employees. The other thing you have to look at is where you're applying, because some consulates are fine with low investment amounts and some are not. So you have to have that local intel with respect to, kind of where you're applying and see what that particular consulate normally likes to see. And then finally is, we have to look at the overall strength of your case. So if there are lots of things that make cases strong. Like, so for example, if you already have employees, then that's going to be really, really good for your case. So you could have contracts that's going to be really, really good for your case. So all of those things can play a factor when looking at how strong your case is, and those can impact exactly how much you have to invest. So the stronger your case is, the less you would have to invest. And and when we talk about this proportionality test, if your investment amount is low, so anything under 500,000 would be considered lower on the lower end, where you would really be required to spend all of that money before applying for the E2 visa. And often, the purchase price of an existing business, whatever that purchase price is, as long as it's a arm's length transaction, is going to be sufficient for the investment amount, as long as that business does have employees. We had someone buy a pizza shop for $75,000, and there were 4 or 5 employees, and that's completely fine for E2. And we mentioned already, franchises are good for E2 visas, and not all expenses are created equal. So it's not just about spending, but it's about spending on things that the government is going to consider good expenditures. So good expenditures are equipment, computers, furniture, inventory, rent. I think those are good expenditures. Whereas something like travel or online courses that you took or something like that, that's not going to be as good of an expenditure. So the next category that we're going to talk about is the National Interest Waiver. And this is, another great category for investors, and one that we've been utilizing frequently. We just had a National Interest Waiver approval for an entrepreneur just last week, and it really can be an excellent category for entrepreneurs, and in particular, people who are on an E2 visa and want to move to some option of a green card. So, with this though, and just keep in mind that for all of these topics that we're going to talk about, I'm going over them relatively quickly, and we do have webinars for each of these topics. So we have National Interest Waiver webinars, we have E2 webinars, and each of those webinars are an hour or longer, right? So there's lots to talk about in these particular areas, but this particular webinar is just to give you a flavor, and then I'd encourage you to attend the other webinars and or go to our YouTube channel, and you'll see old webinars on these particular topics. But the National Interest Waiver is, before you even think of the National Interest Waiver part of it, this falls under the EB2 green card category, and the individual applying has to have either an advanced degree, or which is a master's degree or higher, or what we say is the equivalent, which is a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience. Or they can have what's called exceptional ability, and they have to meet 3 of the 7 or so items that are listed on this slide. Now, it's an either or test. So if you have the master's degree, you can, just stop there. So now you move to step 2 of the 3 prongs. If you have the bachelor's plus 5 years of progressive experience, you can stop there. But if you don't have either of those, like let's say you just have a high school degree, then you have to go to the 3rd and meet under exceptional ability. So if you don't meet one of those 3, then you'd stop there. There's no National Interest Waiver that could be available for you. So now, once you've met one of these, so let's say someone has a master's degree, then this particular visa category is based on a famous case called Danisar, and that case had 3 requirements. And the first requirement is that you have to prove that the proposed endeavor has both substantial merit and national importance. So, this is going to be showing the government that whatever it is you're planning to come to the U.S. to do, that it's a big deal, that the U.S. government's going to find it interesting, that they're going to find it important, and that your endeavor has substantial merit. Now, this one is often the easier one to prove, right? So let's say someone is a cybersecurity expert, and the person says that they're going to create a number of cybersecurity companies that are going to advise the US government on cybersecurity and advise a whole bunch of companies on cybersecurity. And then the impact of this is going to be significant because it's going to stop people from hacking and different things like that. So that would meet prong one, right? You get experts to verify that and validate that. That would meet prong one. But prong two is often the very, very difficult one for national interest waiver, because that's that you're well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor. And now keep in mind that the proposed endeavor that I just mentioned was quite grand, right? So now they say, well, okay, so how many government contracts do you have already? How many times have you done this in the past where you have turned turned something into this kind of success story where you're advising people and benefiting countries or large sections of the population in the past. So that's often where it becomes much more difficult, because on the one hand, with the prong one, we're trying to make the endeavor as grand as possible. But then when we look at prong two, often this is where a lot of national interest waiver petitions get denied, because the government will say that they're not well positioned to advance the endeavor, that endeavor. So they're a cybersecurity expert, no problem. That's fine. They check that box, but they maybe aren't well positioned to advance the endeavor that they initially described. And then finally, we'd look to see if, on balance, it would be beneficial to the United States to waive the job offer. So there are a number of things that we look at there. So, in terms of for entrepreneurs, the Danisar case specifically, before, when you tried to prove this particular category, you had to say, okay, well, the national impact, it's going to impact every state or almost everyone. But now you can actually have something that impacts a much smaller geographical area and still be fine for this. Also, for prong three in particular, we use the argument that the entrepreneur is not eligible for the labor certification process. So that particular prong is not applicable for entrepreneurs. So that's a successful argument that we've used in the past. And then we're always making the argument that it's more likely than not that the endeavor is going to succeed. This slide really goes over a case, and it was a case that someone applied for a national interest waiver. They were denied, and then they were appealed, and then the appeal court said, yes, this is a fine national interest waiver case. And it was a vet that was starting this consulting company that was going to help other vets. And the government looked at a number of the things or the appeals board looked at a number of the things that they had. They submitted expert letters, news and media articles, research reports that supported the issues that people had coming back from war and combat. The letters also went into the government's own initiatives here, just showing that it is of national interest and national importance. And then, with respect to him being well positioned to advance the endeavor, he had a lot of contracts from different organizations that said they would hire him, government organizations. He had a very comprehensive business plan. He had sufficient startup capital and funds with the company to execute the business plan. So all of those things were helpful in getting him approved. And then he used the argument that we talked about regarding self-employment to make prong three not relevant. So now it moves us to the International Entrepreneur Rule. And this one we're not going to spend a lot of time on because it really is not a very popular program. Very few petition applications have actually been filed. And even though this program was introduced during the Obama administration, but then later shelved under the next administration, but then it was revived under the Biden administration. But it's just not very popular because it's difficult to implement. The benefit that it gives you, it's a status called parole. It takes them a long time to adjudicate the applications. While you're waiting, you don't have any benefit in the U.S. So, but it is a possibility, and if you meet these criteria, the entrepreneur has to own, be an owner. Again, they're going to be developing and directing the operation. The startup business has to receive some money, so it can either be from a grant or it can be from specific types of investors, $250,000, or you can come up with other compelling reasons why you meet the criteria. But as I said, it's not a category, I think, that warrants us spending a lot of time on. And as I said, we do have a separate video on international entrepreneur rule, but it's just, as I said, it just really is an area that hasn't gained a lot of traction, unfortunately. And that brings us to the last category of EB5. And this, this is a very, very popular category, especially now. We have done a number of E2 clients that have moved to EB5, and I think it's becoming more and more popular that people are moving to EB5 with their own businesses. So, a few things with the program. The program has gone through a bit of change over the last couple of years. The investment amount has increased. There were some lawsuits the investment amount was increased, then there were some lawsuits, and then it was decreased. And then on March 11th, they kind of came out with the final rules. And now the investment amount is either going to be $800,000 or $1,050,000. And the difference in terms of what amount you're going to use is going to depend on where your business is located. If your business is located in a targeted employment area, then it's going to be $800,000, and if not, the higher amount. A targeted employment area is that your business is located in an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, or in a rural area as defined by the local body. And then you have to be investing in a new commercial enterprise, but that's an enterprise that was started after 1990. So we've done a number of E2s to EB5s for clients that have had businesses in existence for many, many years. And we just had an approval recently for a business. It was a farm. The person had invested over many, many years, and they were in the US on an E2, and now they're approved, and now we're applying for the I-485, the green card for them. In terms of what can be included, some of the things that are included in the E2 can't be included in the EB5. So you do have to look at that, like administrative fees, like legal fees and things like that. They can't be included in the 800,000. And the other thing is, if you have a really successful business, like let's say your business is making $3 million a year, and then that money is being reinvested in the business, and you're spending it, that doesn't count for investment. Investment has to be your personal investment, coming from your personal funds. And so that's definitely, if you paid yourself a salary or distribution and pay tax on it and then reinvested, that would be fine. But it would be a different story if you just wanted to include the retained earnings. And source of funds is very, very complicated for EB5. If you remember, I mentioned that for E2, we kind of gloss over source of funds, but for EB5, we spend a lot of time on source of funds. And it really takes auditing to the next level, because they really are looking at in detail where the money came from. And then the investment has to be an equity investment. It can't just be a loan or something like that. In terms of job creation, this is again very different from E2, because you have to create 10 full-time jobs. So E2 doesn't have a specific employment number, but this is 10 full-time jobs, and it's 10 full-time, not part-time jobs, and also 10 full-time jobs for US citizens or green card holders. So not, people on visas, etc. You have a detailed business plan, especially if you're doing a direct investment here, because there is a regional center program, but much of, as we're talking to investors, much of the people, entrepreneurs are starting their own companies. But you could invest $800,000 in a regional center. So let's say there's a group that's building a hotel or something like that. You could give them the $800,000, and then they would create the jobs for you, and then you might get your money back in several years later. The investment has to be linked to job creation as well, so that's something to keep in mind. So the petition that's filed here, it's an I-526 petition, and the one great thing about the changes on March 11th is that now the I-485 can be filed concurrently. So it gives the person, if someone's in the United States and they file an I-526 petition, it gives them the ability to stay in the United States until that I-526 petition has been adjudicated. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the I-829 petition is filed 2 years after the person has a green card. So yeah, and this is just a recap of all of the different visas, investor visas in the United States that we went over. And now we move to questions and answers, and I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, perfect. So yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us today. And again, we'll be sending out a number of different things, including the PowerPoint, including the copy of the presentation, including the guides. Again, I encourage you to sign up for our YouTube channel. And again, there are, for each of these investor visa options, there are independent separate webinars. So I encourage you either to go to the YouTube channel or to sign up for the for a webinar in the future, because there are a number of these, probably all of the ones that we've talked about, we have a webinar, an upcoming webinar. Sure. So someone's asking about an email. So you can just go to our website and send an email through the info@legalservicesincorporated.com. The questions, when you send questions, if they're really fact specific, then you'd just be better off setting up a consultation, because we'd only, through this forum and through email, there's only a limit to kind of what we can answer. But if you have kind of fact specific questions where you really need guidance, then I think we could definitely do that through a consultation. Some questions are just coming in now, so let's answer some of those. After getting E2 visa, how long should I stay in the US? Is there any regulation to keep visa? No. So there's no regulation, there's no requirement to stay in the US if you have an E2 visa. You are required to, you have the E2 visa to develop and direct the operation, but it doesn't mandate that you live in the United States. So what the idea would be, let's say you were only here for a couple of months a year, the E2 visa would be giving you the ability to work and develop and direct the operation during those few months that you were in the United States. Hi, Ian, thank you for the great explanation. I'd like to know what the typical criteria when you are looking for an existing business. So if you're referring to an E2, then it's a great question, because you should be looking at things that are going to get the business approved, and those are going to be employees. So you don't want to buy a business that's losing money or doesn't have employees. So I think that we often, when clients sign an engagement letter with us for E2 and they're going to buy a business, I always ask them to, before they obviously sign the purchase sale agreement, to send me the tax return of the business for the last year. And that usually will be enough for me to, just in short period of time, 20 minutes, tell them that this is good or this is not good, because the tax returns have salary amounts on it, they have income statement. So that's easy to do. Do you have any business broker partners to help your clients find qualified businesses? We don't. If you send me an email, there is someone I know that does this. I don't think he's a broker, but I think he provides kind of more general overall business support. But just send me an email and I can certainly put the two of you in touch. Excellent. So thank you again very much, and look forward to hearing from you all. Take care. Bye-bye.